Greetings, everyone. Here are the video's main points. Shock at the Kremlin. 30,000 North Korean soldiers enter the battlefield inferno. When record enlistment bonuses of nearly $19,000 completely lose their appeal, and the war machine falls into an extreme manpower crisis, Moscow is forced to take the most desperate step, buying the lives of tens of thousands of Korean sons to delay a political crisis exploding at home. In a brutal scene, thousands of North Korean soldiers are turned into bait for drones. They are turned into expendable resources and fall in droves before Ukraine's dense drone network. The North Korean forces have paid with their blood to learn brutal combat lessons, transforming into a fearsome fighting force like never before. A bloody deal worth $14 billion won trading 8 million artillery shells for top-secret technological secrets, delivering 40 artillery rounds to the Russian battlefield. Leader Kim Jong-un not only pocketed revenue equal to an entire year's economy, but also obtained the golden keys to submarine technology, reconnaissance satellites, and AI drones from the Kremlin. From the Northeast Asian upheaval, missiles transformed in Ukraine are now directly targeting Seoul and Tokyo. The KN-23 ballistic missiles, newly enhanced with metallurgy and terrifyingly improved accuracy through the fire and the steel of European battlefields, are not meant for Ukrainian cities, but are actually deadly threats now targeting others. Welcome to the analysis program of Luan Banqian-su. Before we get into the details, please take a few seconds to like the video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue. Thank you, dear audience. Russia paid a heavy price at Voronezh. 30,000 North Korean troops rushed into the meat grinder. Ladies and gentlemen, the war has not brought glory to Russia, but only left enormous losses, with the number of casualties surpassing the terrifying threshold of 1 million soldiers. The Kremlin understands very well that launching a new military mobilization in the country will come at a high political cost, triggering unpredictable social cracks. Facing the brink of manpower exhaustion, but unable to use his own citizens to fill that gap, President Vladimir Putin is forced to turn to an old ally, North Korea. This bitter truth is no longer hidden in the shadows, but has been exposed to the whole world by President Volodymyr Zelensky, based on detailed intelligence reports. The latest intelligence information reveals a calculated turning point, but also reflects a deep deadlock. Russia is preparing to receive an additional 30,000 soldiers from North Korea. If this plan becomes a reality, it will be the largest deployment of foreign troops in the entire war, doubling the presence of North Korean forces on the front lines. The arrival of these reinforcements is not just a military reinforcement. It is a tacit but bitter admission that Russia's own fighting strength has hit rock bottom. The next step is to maintain this war of attrition with the blood and tears of sons from another nation. This overall picture has been shared through daily video speeches and messages on social media platform X by President Zelensky. Reception infrastructure, accommodation, and integration plans for these forces have been urgently implemented in Voronezh since summer. Along with the infantry forces, Pyongyang is also preparing to send over new ballistic missile launchers. Choosing the Voronezh region is no accident. It is a key link in Russia's logistical supply chain. Located close to Ukraine and right next to the two hot conflict zones of Belgorod and Kursk, Voronezh has long served as a strategic rear base. More importantly, this place used to be the gathering and training point for the first North Korean units sent to Kursk in the fall of 2024. This proves that Moscow is not building a new system from scratch, but is reopening a supply line that has already been tested by fire on a much larger scale. Because of its vital importance, Voronezh has become a key target, continuously subjected to long-range drone attacks by Ukraine throughout the summer, as Kiev has long closely monitored every movement along this corridor. Just a few days before Ukraine made its statement, a special meeting took place right at the Kremlin when President Vladimir Putin welcomed North Korean Foreign Minister Chae Son-hui. During a 4-day visit, which was not accompanied by any official diplomatic reason, anniversary, or multilateral conference, the public remarks of the Kremlin leader, who directly thanked Pyongyang for sending troops from the North Korean People's Army and conveyed a message to Chairman Kim Jong-un, officially brought to light a relationship that had been conducted in the shadows for many years. In diplomatic circles, such meetings have only one meaning: paving the way for much larger events, specifically, according to regional experts, coordinating a potential visit by Kim Jong-un to Russia. After months of denial when the first North Korean soldiers arrived, and then Pyongyang began honoring the fallen as national heroes, now the Russian president has publicly expressed his gratitude right in front of television cameras. The legal framework for this journey from darkness to light was prepared as early as June 2024 through the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Treaty, which includes robust defense provisions. If 30,000 new troops appear, both countries will present it not as an international scandal, but as the implementation of the standards of a signed treaty. Considering the broader context, Russia's use of foreign auxiliary forces results directly from its domestic recruitment system's collapse. Although Kyiv has also issued warnings that the Kremlin is laying the groundwork for a new mobilization in the fall, and according to President Zelensky, the only thing missing from Russia's plan is peace, independent statistics have revealed a harsh reality. Voluntary enlistment, once peaking at 1,200 people per day, has dropped sharply to about 800 at the start of this year. The 71,000 contracts signed in the first quarter mark a 3-year low, and Ukrainian foreign intelligence says the situation hadn't improved by mid-year. The Kremlin's target of recruiting 409,000 troops for 2026 had only reached 195,000 people as of July. Contract signing rates have fallen by 1/3 per month compared to last year. What scares the Moscow leadership the most is that money has lost its pull. Analysis by German economist Zadig Lodz, based on data from the Russian Ministry of Finance, shows that the average enlistment bonus reached a record high of nearly $19,000 in March. It's so much money that an average Russian couldn't earn it after years of work. However, the lines of people signing up are getting shorter. The answer is no longer a secret. If 4 years ago, going to the battlefield meant earning a large sum of money after a few months of service, now everyone understands the truth. Local authorities are having to pay death benefits to the families of an average of 250 to 300 soldiers killed in action each day. In the face of Ukraine's dense drone defense networks, which are ready to destroy attacking forces before they can reach their targets, the recruitment system can't find volunteers anymore and is urgently seeking alternatives. The Russian military's deadlock has forced authorities to take unprecedented recruitment steps. Independent Russian media have exposed a bitter reality. Prisoners and individuals under criminal investigation are being given the opportunity to have their crimes erased in exchange for signing a contract and taking up arms on the battlefield. Covert recruitment campaigns are being disguised as civilian labor hiring in rear areas. In fact, this propaganda effort has even extended to Belarus and China. It is in this state of exhaustion that the true significance of the 30,000 North Korean troops becomes clear. Analysts estimate that this number of troops is only enough to make up for about 1 month's worth of Russian casualties on the battlefield. But for President Vladimir Putin personally, this is not a tactical solution, but rather an ultimate political lifeline. Insider sources from Russia reveal that the Kremlin is intensely discussing a new wave of military mobilization right after the parliamentary elections in September. Every North Korean battalion that sets foot on the front line buys precious time, helping to delay the decision that could spark domestic unrest for a few more months. The most recent historical lesson from the CUSC Frontline 2 years ago is the clearest evidence of the price of this trade-off. In the fall of 2024, about 11,000 North Korean soldiers traveled more than 7,000 kilometers to reach the outskirts of CUSC. Upon arrival, what awaited them were Russian military uniforms and fake identification papers. In theory, they were no longer North Koreans, but had been successfully transformed into Russian citizens from remote and distant regions. The U.S. Institute for the Study of War estimates that in the first weeks of heavy fighting, the North Korean army lost an average of 92 soldiers a day. After just the first 3 months, about 40 out of the original 11,000 troops had completely lost their combat capability. General assessments from British and South Korean intelligence estimate the total number of casualties to be as high as 6,000, while the Ukrainian military claims this number has exceeded 7,000. This horrific level of casualties forced Moscow to quietly withdraw the most heavily damaged units from the front lines in early 2025. However, instead of retreating in the face of devastating losses, leader Kim Jong-un chose the opposite path, turning the battlefield into a live combat laboratory. The remaining North Korean units on the front lines adapted at a surprisingly rapid pace. They broke up large formations into small fire teams, dispersed and moved in open formations, and reacting to drones became a survival instinct. By the beginning of the new year, groups of 15 to 30 people had learned to coordinate concentrated firepower to neutralize individual drones. This effective adaptation even forced the Ukrainian forces to change their drone operation tactics. For Pyongyang, the Kursk front is not simply a place to test their mettle, but a live firing range with lessons that can't be bought at any price. An army that hasn't experienced conventional warfare for decades is now gaining direct experience against modern Western equipment in an environment saturated with electronic warfare and drone reconnaissance. These hard-earned lessons don't remain in Kursk, as South Korean intelligence confirmed that returning survivors are sharing their battlefield experience with all North Korean armed forces. Despite those sacrifices, the presence of North Korean forces has never ceased. Behind the fog of war, the Russian military machine's dependence on foreign aid has entered an irreversible stage. Reports from Western observers and the Ukrainian government reveal a shocking reality. Up to 40% of the artillery shells fired by Russian artillery on the battlefield originate from North Korea. A similar situation is happening on the ballistic missile front, as about 1/3 of the ballistic missiles launched by Russia are K-23 missiles produced by Pyongyang. The exhaustion of the defense industry's capacity is clearly reflected in the statistics. In just the first 19 days of July, Russia launched as many as 107 ballistic missiles, far exceeding the total monthly production capacity of all domestic factories. During that same period, 20 hypersonic missiles were also used up, even though Russia's production capacity for this expensive weapon is only about 30 units per year. Moscow is burning through ammunition much faster than it can produce it, and that gap is being directly filled by shipments arriving from North Korea. President Zelensky's warning about Pyongyang preparing to supply more new missile launchers is simply an extension of a harsh mathematical reality. Russia's needs are no longer a luxury, but have become a matter of survival. However, in this bloody deal, the one who reaps the greatest fortune is Kim Jong-un. A report from the Korean National Security Strategy Institute points out that just from August 2023 to the end of 2025, military cooperation with Russia has brought North Korea a huge revenue ranging from $7 billion to $14.4 billion. To grasp the enormous scale, even the lowest figure at the highest estimate is equivalent to North Korea's entire annual economic output. Of that amount, more than $600 million was paid directly as compensation for troop deployments. Alongside the influx of hard currency, a supply line that broke through all United Nations sanctions barriers was established, openly transporting crude oil and refined fuel to North Korea in volumes far exceeding the UN's annual quota of 500,000 barrels, along with trains loaded with grain and food supplies. As a result, an economy that had been strangled by sanctions and famine for decades suddenly grew by about 4%, with the heavy industry sector recording a record-breaking boom of 10.7%. The war in Europe has become an invaluable economic lifeline for Pyongyang. The list of technology transfers doesn't stop there. According to the United States Indo-Pacific Command, the technical aid package that Moscow is providing to Pyongyang also includes support for submarine design and integrated artificial intelligence drone systems. Traces of Russian weapons technology are clearly visible on North Korea's new class of destroyers, and the support from Russian engineers was also the driving force that helped Pyongyang successfully launch its first military reconnaissance satellite in 2023. In exchange for that treasure trove of technology, the price that Kim Jong-un pays at the negotiating table is the blood and lives of his own soldiers. A price that, for a totalitarian regime, is simply numbers in accounting books that can be easily suppressed in the face of public opinion in one of the most closed societies in the world. The impact of this alliance doesn't stop at the border between Moscow and Pyongyang, but is sparking a shockwave spreading across Asia. Just as warned by the Kiev government, every piece of technology entering North Korea's arsenal and every combat lesson learned from the battlefield will eventually come back to threaten the countries within Pyongyang's missile range. The KN-23 missiles, whose accuracy has just been upgraded through combat, are not aimed at Ukrainian cities. Their ultimate intended targets are Seoul and Tokyo. Facing this serious security threat, the Washington-Seoul-Tokyo axis has tightened their joint nuclear deterrence mechanism. Even in the Seoul-Tokyo corridor, where history is full of disagreements, the leaders of the two countries have initiated reciprocal visits to strengthen their defense. On the other hand, the opposing bloc immediately responded. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov directly threatened the three countries over forming an alliance targeting North Korea, while joint patrols by Russian and Chinese strategic bombers entering South Korea's air defense identification zone have become a regular show of force. In fact, the North Korean card is not the Kremlin's only crutch. Ukrainian military intelligence has recorded more than 2,800 foreign mercenaries from over 130 countries appearing in the ranks of the military. Cuba leads with at least 20,000 personnel. The covert recruitment has also extended to Iran, with a joining bonus of up to $20,000, along with a campaign to recruit fighters in Africa, targeting 18,500 fighters for the year 2026. Domestically, the forced recruitment of immigrants and prisoners continues before the nationwide mobilization button is pressed after the election. However, none of the options have been as effective as North Korea. The freelance mercenary forces are fragmented, poorly trained, and full of legal risks. North Korea is the most organized and functional choice on a menu of bad options, and that's why the Kremlin is clinging to this alliance at all costs. So, in your opinion, will receiving tens of thousands of troops and abundant ammunition from North Korea be enough for Russia to change the situation on the battlefield?